as usual, forgot to sort out the audio before I start. There we go. Time, I think, in America, so probably nobody around, but that's okay. If you are in the chat, the whole point of this chat is for you to be able to interact and ask questions or whatever, because I'll repeat this in a minute, but I did a couple of blog posts on the scientific method of prayer, which the usual suspects are trying to confuse people about. So let me know that you've got decent audio and decent video. While I wish you happy Father's Day, and I share a glass of white wine with you. So yeah, okay. There's apparently 2 of you. If you can hear me, okay, please just ping a point. There's a thumbs up. Yeah. So like I said, the whole point of this of the stream is really the whole scientific way of praying, which I've been exploring that for 10 years now, actually. Audio is 5x5, video just fine. Perfect. Thank you, Sam. So, well, there's actually a few people popping in, so I may just again wish you a happy Father's Day, and may bitch to you about other incidental shit just for about 2 or 3 minutes before we get into the pious topic of prayer. So, just Italian bureaucracy is just retarded. I'm getting like this happens every month, like either with the electricity or the water bill or whatever. It's like I don't get a bill for like 3 months, and then I get a solicitation for an unpaid bill. I'm like, dude, you've got my email, you've got my address. I didn't get anything in the post. I didn't get anything on email. I've subscribed to all your crappy online like apps, and I go there and it's like you can't download the latest bill. It's just like, it's basically like the mafia. It's like, you owe us this amount of money. Oh, why? Because we say so. It's like, what the fuck? It's good morning, Michael P. So it's just, yeah, it's a bit retarded that I've been dealing with that for the last day or two, and it's just, then I did get the one bill, and of course they posted, the weather here has just been insane. We had hail, like a really strong hail about 4 or 5 days ago. And it's like, then it's the next day, it's like harsh sunshine. So you think, okay, I can get back to the gasifier. And then the next day it's just torrential rain again. It's like, what the fuck? All the fruit on all the trees is like rotted on the tree. It was never edible. It never got to a point where it's just good. So I don't know what the hell they've been chem spraying us with. And it's not just my trees or my place. It's like everywhere. Everybody's saying the same thing. And apparently in England too, that's what's happening. So yeah, I think I need to, sort out a greenhouse properly soon, I think. But anyway, to get back to the topic. So the idea is, if you're in the chat, to interact as much as possible. Hopefully you've read the blog post that I did the day before yesterday about the problem of evil, and then the one that I did yesterday, which is like God answers prayers in 2 days, which is a little bit of a clickbait title, but the point is that the actual topic that I cover in that thing is very real, and it's not something I just like threw up there. Partly what prompted me to do the live stream on this is because some moron on Social Galactic goes like, oh, well, I kind of agree with a fake deacon that you can't rely on just your experience for prayer. It's like, did you even read what I wrote? I specifically said this is not just my experience or my observation. It's not personal to me. The whole point is like, there is a certain way to pray, which I did discuss in quite some detail in video number 83. So I'm I'm actually going to type that in the chat here. In case you want to go and research this, I would say go to the blog and look at the blog from the post from yesterday. And then I'll just put here video 83 scientific prayer. But the thing that's interested me is that, and you know, the reason I take so long to write nonfiction books, like for example, you know, The Face on Mars I wrote when I was 26, but I had been asking questions and reading physics books and astronomy books for fun since a very early age. You know, by the age of 4, I knew what a light year was and how it worked. And by the age of 25, I literally knew everything there was to know about the solar system, the various planets and gravity and all that stuff. The moon, I had a telescope when I was barely out of my teens, and I was watching the moon. I even managed to, like, again, as an early teen, I'm talking 12, 13 years old, I had a telescope with a sun filter that I could like project the sun, you know, put the telescope against the sun, and because I had a sun filter, I could project the sun on a white piece of paper where I could see the sunspots and so on. So I was way ahead, you know. Astronomy was kind of like my hobby, my thing, and physics and chemistry. But that's when I wrote The Face on Mars. The next book that I wrote that was nonfiction was Systema, and I'd been doing martial arts for over 30 years by the time I wrote that book. And the next book that I wrote, the Reclaiming the Catholic Church, that's nonfiction, that was after 7 years of intensive obsessive study on just one concept about the Catholic Church and how it got infiltrated and so on. So what I'm saying here is, like, my nonfiction work has got nothing to do with my opinion. I will present my opinion in those books. I will present my anecdotal evidence from my personal experience, or even anecdotal evidence from other people's experience. But that's why my books are like covered, you know, they're covered in like footnotes, because the whole point is to be very clear when it's my opinion or my, you know, my personal experience compared to the observations that I'm making, which are global. You know, like the whole point of, like, I mean, look, if I just open, oh, and by the way, I've just found out that Amazon has been printing these things, these ones, some of them, not all of them, because I've ordered like autocopies to like see what the hell's going on. And it's not from my file. My file is good, but you see what I mean? Like, there's like chapters that start halfway down the page. It's really odd. I don't know why they've done that. It's not from my file that I've uploaded. But you know, this book, they tried to like take it down a couple of times because, oh no, it's got like stuff from the internet. I'm like, it's a book that covers 200 years of history, and I provide links or certain, you know, within copyrights, totally within copyrights thing. And it was obviously some SJW that tried it, because I wrote back to Amazon in no uncertain terms, like, you put this back up immediately because, you know, you're wrong. And you're going totally against the rules. And it was up within like not even 5 hours later, it was back up. So we're like, oh yeah, oops. But you know, so it may be that there's somebody messing with it. So if you get a copy, if you've got a copy that's got like, with it, the chapters start off a bit like halfway down the page. I just think of it as, well, think of it as a, yeah, you see like this. I mean, like, oh, it's just really irritating. That they do this. So there's like a table that like starts on one page and it's like half across the next, but this is not my layout, okay? But anyway, if you open this at random, just about anywhere, you'll find, you know, there you go, there's another footnote. There's plenty of footnotes and plenty of like details for you to go and verify for yourself what I'm saying. I don't expect anybody on my nonfiction stuff to take my word for it. I expect you to check it, you know. So the whole point of me writing about this like prayer, and the fact that if you pray correctly, it seems to be about 2 days that you get a really quite miraculous response in my personal experience, and in the experience of many other people that have tried this. So if you read the blog post, I discuss there the methodology of prayer that actually sort of works. And it ties in, by the way, with everything that mystics throughout the ages of Catholicism have said. From a very good book on this is The Cloud of Unknowing. It's a very small book. And if I were you, if you're going to read The Cloud of Unknowing, you can get it free off the internet, the original, which is written in Middle English. I would get the original Middle English PDF downloaded off the internet, and then I would get the Penguin Modern English version of it, because Middle English is legible, it's quite understandable, but certain words, especially particularly one word that I very much like the way it was used in the original Middle English, is the word wit. As it's a mixture of intelligence, fast thinking, perspicacity of perception. So there's some words that are, it gives you a different flavor of the language, which is much richer than modern English, in my opinion, by the way. You know, I speak several languages fluently, so it's quite interesting to see how Middle English, in my opinion, was a better version of English than the present day. Certainly for discussing topics of a spiritual nature. Modern English is excellent for describing technical matters of a very sort of mechanistic nature. But anyway, the whole point is, if you've read the blog posts and you have questions or there's something that's not clear, this is the place to fire them out. Because I think I've been as clear as I can be on the blog post, but it is only 10 years of study on this. I would prefer 20 years of study. However, it's quite an important topic, and I think that if I can help somebody learn to initially at least observe how prayer works, and begin practicing it correctly, and therefore experimenting for themselves in how efficient it is, I think that's a very useful thing. And I think probably in today's environment very, very much needed. Now, I'm no preacher, I'm certainly no, I'm not any kind of a priest or have any inclinations to that way. But if I find something that is useful as a general life skill, I definitely want to pass it on. Similarly, if you have read the blog post and you think, yeah, that makes perfect sense, or you have similar experiences, then please go ahead and put it on the chat. I want this to be as much as possible interactive, and I realize there's only a few of here. It's Sunday lunchtime for the States. So if that's not the case, then fine. I may just talk about my latest slight obsession, which is an Uberti 38 special Navy 1851 that's been converted to take modern ammunition. That's what I've been dreaming of. Okay, TVC says, first question, why exactly is it 2 days or a multiple day delay? Why not 1 day or immediate? I don't know. That is just what I've observed, and that's what other people seem to have observed. I have very, 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 very extremely tentative, slightly educated guesses as to why. So here, and they're, my guesses, there are separate guesses which could have nothing to do with each other, or it could be a mixture of all of the above to some degree, right? So my first point on that question is, I think that it is a function of your personal faith. In other words, if your faith is as that Roman centurion that had a sick, I can't remember if it was a sick son or a sick servant that was basically almost dying, and he went to Jesus and he sort of said, hey, can you help? And Jesus said, yeah, he's sorted. And the guy goes, okay, thanks. And Jesus sort of like, hey, why you, how come you believe that? And he goes, well, because you told me it is, and that's it. If your faith is at that level, then I think it can be quite instant. But I think in part it's a measure of that. I think that's one aspect. Another aspect is depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve or asking for or or wish would happen, there may be other factors involved outside of you. So, for example, it can involve other people, it can involve, and especially if and when it involves other people, which generally it would, right? Like if your kid is sick, or I don't know, whatever relationship you have is you know, you it's not working well or whatever, you will be asking also for, at the very least, you'd be asking for your understanding of that situation in the context of another human being who also has free will, and so I think there's an element of that that may slow the process down. A third point is in the Bible somewhere, and I can't remember if it's Daniel, that the archangel, I think it's the Archangel Michael possibly, sort of goes, oh, I've been trying to come and help you, but the Prince of Persia, whatever, they're like, one of the demons was like fighting, blocking me off. So there may be an element of that, some kind of demonic oppression or some spiritual barrier that I wouldn't think God needs to push through that, but maybe there are certain rules or certain hierarchy that needs to work through that. And another thing, completely separate point again, is that time works differently in the spiritual realm than it does here. So like what can feel like 20 years up there might just be, like a minute here, or vice versa. What feels like 20 years here is just like a minute for them over there. So it may be that, like, in terms of the spiritual realm, it's an almost instant response, but an instant response there of 2 seconds might be 2 days here. I hope that answers the question. Well, to the extent that I can answer it, because the full answer is I don't know. These are just sort of guesses. Second question: how can a person train an attitude, i.e., if one has a tendency towards grabbing onto selfish desire, how can that inner attitude be shaped, developed, trained? Well, like any habit, like any bad habit, like any characteristic. Let me start a bit further back. Human beings have a tendency to think, oh, this is just how I am. This is who I am. So, maybe you were raped as a kid and it messed up with your sexuality, and now you're gay and you think, oh, that's who I am. Or you were beaten as a kid and now you're scared of whatever, and that's just who you are. Or you were lied to as a kid, so you become naturally suspicious, and that's just who you are. But none of that is true. Absolutely none of that is true. These are formations or deformations in your mind, in your body, in your thinking, in your brain, physically, neurological pathways, that you can change. You can absolutely change them. A really good book on this is The Brain That Changes Itself by a doctor whose name escapes me. It's got an orange cover and I think the drawing of a brain on it. Your neurology, again, hypnosis and all sorts of other things prove this. Your neurology is affected by emotions. You can have a very powerful emotion, like I did, the road to Damascus moment, that changes you permanently in one go. That's usually, rare. It's not very, very common, but it's common enough that it's a known thing that can happen, that does happen. Similarly, you can have an intense enough thought, an intense enough realization that it shifts your perception of things greatly. And then there is just training. Like if you recognize that you're a selfish, solipsistic person, and you constantly, daily force yourself to be more altruistic and get rid of that thing, and as soon as that behavior pops up, you do something to counter it, over time, you will develop new behaviors, new patterns. Generally speaking, there's two ways to go about it. Then the normal way is if you just do the behavior, regardless of how you feel about it, you just do it, but you're consistent, right? That's like the guy going training, even when he doesn't feel like it, and he knows he goes every day for an hour, he goes running or training or whatever, and he just does it, regardless of how he feels. Even if he wants to puke at the idea, he just gets up and he goes there. After 3 months, you've, generally speaking, replaced that behavior. You've instilled a new behavior. An even faster way is if you totally abstain from anything that gave you pleasure at all. Whether it's, having a tea with sugar, just abstain from having any pleasure at all and just like do the thing that you want to do, that you want to be the new behavior, and that's it. So it's like, oh, but I want to play a game. No, I just do that behavior. Oh, but I would like to have a tea with honey in it. No, just do that behavior. And you do that, then in about a week, you can reset quite a lot of your neurology to do that. So that's how it works. And I can see that your follow-on question is like, how is it different from training a muscle, for example? It's not really, but you also mustn't get it wrong. That people say, oh, training the mind is like training muscle. Not quite. And also training the muscle is not quite what you think, because I'll give you an example. The guy that trained me in Systema, he was like explaining to me how, well, I experienced this with training with him. Like maybe punch a bag for like 2 weeks, just with one hand, one punch. Not different types of punches, just one punch on one hand, 2 hours a day for 2 weeks in a row. It was like mind-numbing. And it's only because I'm like, Japanese samurai. Oh, daimyo says punch, I punch. I was like fucking retarded, whatever. I know this guy knows what he's doing, so I just do what he said, no questions. 2 weeks later, he goes, okay, it's enough. Now you punch with the left arm. And I swear to God, I thought, oh, fuck, now I'm going to have to do 2 weeks with this left arm. So I get in there, boom, I throw out the left hand, and it's like, bang! It's like, what the fuck? It's like, I've got superpowers in my left arm. And he knew that was going to happen, because he looked at me and he goes, you understand now? Okay, now you can go back to normal training. I was like, he just rewired my brain by doing one side only, and the other side just picked it up, because your brain mirrors your brain maps. So that 2-week period, I didn't really develop any new muscle. Similarly, and even more thing is like in his platoon, there was a guy that couldn't do a single pull-up. He couldn't do a single pull-up, and if he couldn't do like the 10 pull-ups that they had to all do, they'd punish the whole platoon. So one night at midnight, they grabbed this guy out of bed, all the other soldiers, they threw him up on the bars, and they beat the shit out of him every time he fell down. Guess what? The next day he could do 10 pull-ups. Now, you didn't build any new muscles in like a day, especially when you had the shit kicked out of you for 6-7 hours in a row. But his brain just fucking did, and it like regrouped, rewired all his neurons. His brain map got like rewired in literally a few hours to like, this is absolute survival stuff, and so I'm going to do it. So you can do that with mental behaviors a lot faster than you can actually physically develop the muscle. Now, in other words, that might work. The little grandma with the nephew that's stuck under a train and she just lifts a train. That can happen, but it's not healthy, it's not advisable, and it can seriously cause you like permanent injury. So the human brain has a capacity for overload that you have no idea about, the human body as well. But with the human mind, as far as behaviors are concerned, you can do that like that if you understand the methodology and if you go through that methodology. Doing that consciously is very, 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 very difficult, primarily because no one is willing to put themselves mentally, emotionally, psychologically through what you need to do to rewire your brain to that extent. I guarantee you that, and let's just say I talking about a friend, somebody that I may have known has definitely done this. You can rewire a person's religion in about 3 hours. It's not a pleasant process. You can literally rewire a person's brain on major, major topics in about 2 hours. And, of course, I'm a kind, gentle person, so I would never do that. But certain people I have known may have had occasion to have to do that sort of thing to some nasty people that had nasty attitudes. And you can literally rewire a person's brain to completely be very different, to the point that few years down the line, it's still there and it's still wired in. Like I said, that's not a pleasant process. It's probably against all sorts of laws and Geneva Conventions and whatever, but it absolutely can be done. And anybody in PsyOps that's, the people who do this for a kind of living, they're not nice people. You don't want to have anything to do with them. You don't want to get involved with that sort of thing. But let's just say I have personal knowledge that this stuff can be done. I hope that answers your question. If not, please, ask me in more detail. I'll try and explain. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you, Pedro. Sam Werup says, are the 2 days connected perhaps to guardian angels offering our prayers to God or approval, as mentioned in the book of Tobit? I am nowhere near as good a biblical scholar as most of you probably are. So that may well be, Sam. I don't know the book of Tobit, certainly not off the top of my head. I did make a very brief post today about one of the guys on SG, mentioned how silence is very important. Yes, thank you, Tony. Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself, by a doctor called Norman Doidge. It's a very, very, very good book in that it explains the flexibility of the brain, which explains the flexibility. Well, it doesn't explain it in the book, but I'm telling you, you can change your neurology so much that your personality, what you think is who you are, you think, I'm Tony and I'm this way. No, you're not. You can become literally the opposite of what you think you are. And you can do that consciously. It's not an easy process. Most human beings never, ever, ever, ever even go anywhere near touching that, but it is absolutely doable. I've done it a few times. It can be done. I've helped other people do it. So it's you are not who you think you are. You are not your personality. So I hope that helps explain the thing. But again, as I said, if not, just ask and I'll try and clear it up. Backstabber says, hi, hello everybody. James Tong, good afternoon. TVC says, yes, that connection makes sense. That's why virtue, okay, spelled here. Virtue seems to network. Practicing patience makes purity easier, which makes charity easier, which makes courage easier. Yeah, very, very true. It's what they call, I think, a purity spiral, or a virtuous circle, instead of a vicious circle. The more good you do as a general thing, the easier it is to do more good. The more bad you do, the easier it is to do more bad, You didn't answer my first 2 questions. Thank you. You're welcome. Michael P. Look into behaviorism. It has good principles for behavioral self-management. Also, it isn't too difficult to change / add new behaviors if you know what to do. Yeah, the knowing what to do is very important. For example, you get a drug addict. I remember I had this girlfriend, very beautiful girl, but broken brain, and she had she had done drugs, she'd done just about every drug under the sun and been with a whole lot, she was a really kind of a mess. But when I met her, she wasn't even smoking cigarettes, she was super clean. And I was like, then she told me about her history, and I was like, whoa, how did you do that? What did you do that? And she goes, oh, it was just one day. One day I saw myself, I was just in my knickers, half naked as I did, unshowered, didn't brush my teeth, for a week. And I was just walking past the fridge, and I took out an orange juice carton that was in the fridge, and I drank a bit of orange juice. And as I was doing that, I saw myself in the mirror, how skinny I was and how, unkempt sort of I was. But I drank a bit of orange juice, which had vitamin C, and I thought that was the first time I'd done something for myself that was positive. And then as a result of that, I just never went back. So she cold turkey stopped pretty hard drugs, drinking, it was just fuck me, because you saw yourself drinking orange juice. It doesn't make sense to a normal person, but it made perfect sense to me because I was, by then I had already learned about hypnosis and so on. And it's what they call a significant emotional event. So a significant emotional event is significant to you. It doesn't necessarily mean anything to anybody else, but it's a significant emotional event to you, will have an impact on your neurology, and that can absolutely change your behavior instantly. So Michael P says some methods may be unethical, but they probably work better. Well, yes. Again, I want to make a very clear distinction between unethical and, well, three distinctions: unethical, unlawful, and unorthodox. Milton Erickson, for example, has been accused by various, especially feminists, but pretty much a whole bunch of people, as being unethical. That is a lie. Milton Erickson was probably one of the most ethical human beings that ever graced to walk the earth. What he did do, and this is a very, very fine line, and I don't want anybody to get the idea that it's okay to do this, because for most people, doing what I'm going to tell you next is an absolute recipe for disaster and causing damage, egomania, narcissism, and all that stuff. What Milton Erickson did is he did whatever was necessary to get his patient or his client that came to him for help to be helped in the way that they required. Now, how did he know what they required? They pretty much told him. They basically came to him because they had a problem. He realized what that problem was, and he realized how to improve on that problem, and he did whatever was required to get them there. Sometimes that requirement meant taking action that in today's world people would think, oh, that is just so unfair, but that personally I have zero problem with. I'll give you one of the examples from actual Milton Erickson's thing. Milton Erickson for a time also worked in a mental asylum. So he had neuropsychology is not bunk, but I'll get back to that. So Milton Erickson worked in a mental asylum, and so he had to deal with like people that were severely mentally like disturbed. One guy that he had that was mentally disturbed, like he kept thinking or pretending that he didn't have a stomach, so didn't want to eat, and they were like trying to feed him with like by intubation and like all sorts of things, and he was like, I don't have a stomach, I can't eat, and he had like this mental sort of thing. So what Milton Erickson did is like he gave him nothing to drink. He locked him in a room for like 3 days with no food, no water, nothing, and then he left like on a pedestal. Then he got rid of all the other patients, locked all the other patients away, and opened the door to this guy, and all that there was outside was a pedestal with a huge glass of milk with eggs in it. And so the guy came out, he was dying of thirst and hungry, and he drank this whole giant vat of milk and raw eggs. And then Milton Erickson said, yep, don't worry, you're going to have a stomach now, because the guy hadn't eaten or drank anything for 3 days. So obviously that stuff just came out of him, top, bottom, shat himself, he like vomited. And he was like, we're going to do that again until you remember that you have a stomach. The guy was cured, in like 3 days of forced fasting by like 2 liters of like probably semi-off milk with a bit of raw egg in it. All of a sudden he had a stomach, he had a butthole, he had an esophagus, it all activated itself. Now, if you do that today, people are going to say, oh, you've taken away his, liberty of action. But was the man cured? Was he now mentally in better health? Yes, he was. And eventually, I believe that guy got discharged. There were many, many examples of this. Another one that I don't want to lie, I don't want to make a mistake, but there was one where there was this child that used to like wee themselves at age 7 or 8 or something. And the parents were very concerned. And instead of having a formal setting, he invited them to dinner. So they had the dad, the mom, and then the child. And now Milton Erickson was already quite famous by this time. So they came over for dinner, and he like, on a pretense, he like, I don't know, he poured them a glass of drink, or then he made them pour the glass of drink. And then he just fucking railed. He just started railing at them. At first, initially, a little bit at the mother, and then immediately at the father. Like, oh, you're just disorganized, and how could you do that? You come into my house, just like fucking went wild on the fucking dad. And these guys were like so like stunned. And he goes, well, of course your child, has problems. Look at you fucking idiot. And he just like went apeshit at them. They left, and then 2 days later he called them up and he goes, so, I believe your son has now stopped urinating himself. And they were like, they'd forgotten about it. They were so traumatized by him fucking having a go at them that they were like, oh, well, yeah. And he goes, okay, do you get it now? And they were like, not really. And he goes, yeah, it's your behavior that's wrong. And they were like, fuck. That's it. Again, cure the thing. Now, if you do that in today's world, you're going to get sued for like harassment or misogyny or fuck knows what, right? So is that unethical? Now, I have a very precise definition of unethical. And according to my definition of it, no, I don't think that's unethical at all. In today's world, you could say it's illegal or unlawful. I don't particularly care about the law because the law changes with time and place. Some laws are good, some laws are bad. I mean, again, if you're in Nazi Germany, there were some laws that you had to follow or that I wouldn't have. And there are laws, that are just wrong that I wouldn't bother with because they're evil. So law is, depends what law it is. Is what he did unethical? No, he fixed the problem. And he helped these people make some realizations about themselves and so on. So I don't think Milton Erickson was unethical. Milton Erickson, I absolutely know, was not unethical because of what he made the world believe about hypnosis, which I mention only en passant. There's 10 of you here, so I can probably mention it. Milton Erickson made everybody believe that in hypnosis, you can't really force anybody to do anything that doesn't fit with their moral beliefs. It's true up to a point. But the so-called Manchurian candidate, you absolutely can create those. And guess what? The guys who strap themselves up with explosive and blow themselves up, that's indoctrination. That's a kind of hypnosis. You absolutely can make people do things that they wouldn't normally do with hypnosis. It's a brutal process. It's not something that, you're not just going to go to a hypnotist for a 45-minute session to stop smoking and suddenly become a bank robber. That's not very likely. There are some people that are extremely susceptible who might even do that once, but over time that will wear out. But the point is he did that because he didn't want people to take advantage of this hypnosis sort of powers. He also wanted to restrict it to trained doctors and so on, which would have been a mistake because trained doctors are amongst the people, as we now know, and as studies, from the 40s on proved that actually medical doctors are some of the easiest people to indoctrinate to do all sorts of horrific shit on the basis of it's for science or that sort of thing. So unorthodox means that it's not illegal and it's not unethical, but it's unusual. I have certainly advised some of my clients in an unorthodox way, and it's helped them immensely. Okay, error making local recording, so it's not okay. Hopefully you can still hear me. If you can't, tell me. So again, I hope that's what was the question. Yeah, unethical. I hope I've answered the question. Again, if I haven't answered questions, guys, don't be scared to tell me. Sam Wereb, is neuropsychology bunk? No, it's not bunk, but it's like anything. Are imagining numbers bunk? No, they're not. But when are they useful? Who's telling you, and how are you using it? Neuropsychology is certainly the way I use it or I think of it is absolutely real. The human brain, although we're all unique, is still to a certain extent somewhat of a finite entity. So you can say, yes, all human beings are unique, And yes, some human beings don't have arms or legs, or they don't have all their arms or legs, but generally speaking, a human being has got 2 arms and 2 legs. And as a template, that's correct. You're going to get individual variations. You know, you're not even going to get 2 people that have the same hand. Even twins don't. But, you know, generally speaking, everybody has 2 hands and 2 arms and 2 legs. There are always little exceptions, but even those exceptions are exceptions to the rule that they should, in theory, fall within, you know. So as long as you approach neuropsychology in that respect, and as long as you go on the hard science, for example, there are very clear indicators that certain areas of the brain are responsible for certain behavior, certain things. The very famous guy, I forget, Gage, was it Gage? Guy who, like, you know, he had a metal pole that basically go through his head and remove part of his brain, and he survived, but his personality totally changed. And that's not unusual. So, TVC says, could you speak more about this paradox? In prayer, we must be devoid of desire, yet we desire that the outcome of our prayers come to pass. Yes, of course. That is the thing, right? That's difficult to understand, and that's why some people think, oh, you can't talk about scientific prayer. That's absolute bullshit. But before you understand what I mean by scientific prayer, you have to understand what the scientific method is. Before you understand what the scientific method actually is, you have to understand logic and reason, and the thing that is nowadays taboo almost, objective reality. Objective reality exists, logic and reason exist and are usable to discover more about objective reality. God is a God of reason, because it's a Catholic God, it's not a Protestant God. You know, Protestants all, I don't care what anybody says, Protestants all ultimately follow the footsteps of the heretic Martin Luther, who said reason is the whore of the devil. If you're actually Catholic, you know very well that we are made in the image of God, and we are very much told that you can reason your way through things. Catholicism, at first brush, especially if you're invested in the zeitgeist of the heretic nonsense of the current fake Catholic Church and Hollywood and the zeitgeist of TV and whatever, Catholicism seems absurd. But if you actually look at actual Catholicism, it's an absolutely logical, very, very deeply reasoned logic that makes absolute sense, and that models the real world and predicts the real world better than any other system, bar none. Said like this, if your average understanding of Catholicism or even just Christianity in general is like what most people's is, you think what I just said is nonsense and I'm some kind of brainwashed zealot. Keep in mind that until 10 years ago, I was one of you. No, Catholicism is absolutely logical and reasoned. So, to answer your question, the closest thing that comes to explaining that is, funnily enough, Buddhism, Zen agnosticism, because now let me try and put that in the context of Catholicism. In the Bible, it says that if your faith is strong enough, the mountain comes to you, right? Your faith will move mountains. And that is absolutely true. I genuinely, honestly believe that if your faith is close to perfect or perfect, you could walk on water. I do believe you could fly, like Neo in the Matrix, right? But it would have to be such a strong, absolute knowledge of how reality really works. And why would that work? Why would that be logical? Because, oh, it's not logical at all that you think you can fly. Well, it is, because we're made in God's image. God is the ultimate creator, and he can literally do anything. So if he can do anything, you think that we wouldn't be able to fly? And again, if you look at the history of miracles of the saints, there are teleportation, telelocation, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. I've personally experienced some of these things, which I don't really talk about because it's pointless. People are just going to assume you're crazy, whatever. But there are absolutely the so-called laws of physics that your average atheist thinks are written in stone are not. And I've posted on the blog the link to Rupert Sheldrake's like 20-minute banned TED talk. He did a TED talk and then they banned it. Go and look at those 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes will teach you more about science than you did in 20 years of like high school and university and whatever. The speed of light is not fixed. Now, I have known this. I have personally realized this without knowing anything about Rupert Sheldrake before the age of 20, which leads into the ether. And, I've put some blog posts about Maxwell equations and stuff like that. So if you're interested, it leads into all sorts of things, because once you find a grain of truth, it touches everything. So the paradox is, it's not, you see, in the world of Satan, in the dominion of the enemy, the way that, you've got this sitting here and I want to get that. And in the way of the world, it's like, I have to go there, grab it, pull it towards me, then open it up and put it on my head. And that's how the world in the physical realm works. But the physical realm is a lower order realm or plane of existence that is subject to the spiritual realm. It is not actually correct to divide these two. This is just a simplification. Like when they tell you that an atom is a little ball of matter, it's absolute bullshit. But it works to a certain extent, right? So just bear with me. It's not a perfect model, but it's a close approximation. So the layer of reality that is the physical world is below the layer of reality that is the spiritual world. The spiritual world creates, informs, and has effects in the physical world. If you're operating in the physical world, to go from A to B, you've got to get in the car and drive from A to B. In the spiritual world, the laws of physics, if you want to call it that, or the laws of reality, if you prefer, are different. In the spiritual world, you don't reach for something. Reaching for something implies desire. Desire is based on fear. Fear is the opposite of faith. Why do I say that? Oh, but I want a good thing. I want my son to be happy, or my wife to feel good, or my friend to have a lot of money, or whatever. But that is a desire that is based on, we don't have X, we want to have X. Even if not for ourselves, for somebody else. We want to do something to fill a hole. And if the reality is the spiritual world, you have everything already. Everything is already there. There is no fear, there is no lack, there is no sadness, there is nothing bad. So the method of getting from A to B, or getting A to be with you, A being an object, a situation, a person, whatever, is not to reach out for it, but is to be calm in your center and consider that thing. So it's more like dreams, right? Like when you're in a dream, you don't need to think in my dream I'm going to be driving a Lamborghini. You don't need to go through the whole process of working for 10 years to get the money to buy a Lamborghini. Most dreams you're like, Lamborghini, cool, and you're in a Lamborghini because you'd have thought of one and it just appears. And this is sort of the spiritual realm works like this. So it's like prayer is spiritual realm stuff. So it's like, say you want peace, there's something giving you anxiety. Most people, why do they pray? They don't pray when they're super happy. Maybe if they are, when they're super happy, the most they do is sort of hey, thanks, kind of thing. Most people pray when they're in deep shit, when something's going wrong, when something's hurting them. And then they're like, oh, please help me. And it's all fear-based. But if instead you can just tamp that down and just suck yourself up into your own little... There's a book by A.A. Attanasio called Radix. And funnily enough, I read this book when I was in my very early 20s. I knew nothing about Systema, but in that book, the guy describes some kind of combat system that is basically Systema. And he talks about how you can hide from people and you can make yourself small by just like sucking in your aura. And it's real. This actually works. I knew how to do this long before I came across Systema because I worked as a bodyguard, an armed bodyguard, and I was into martial arts very, very heavily. There is truth in this stuff. So it's kind of like if you can just contain yourself and be calm, just become zen. Another point where you see this in a film is Equilibrium, the film with Christian Bale. You know, the plot line is kind of shit, but the fighting sequences and the concept is very, very good. And there's a piece where they like hook him up to like a lie detector machine, you know, and he's like getting worried because they're going to catch him out, and you can see that the lie detector go, and then he's like, and then it just goes, he's like flatline. He's like got no emotions anymore. And as soon as that happened, because I personally have experienced that myself in like situations, I just thought, ooh, you know, if I'd been in the room and I was one of the guys, the guards or whatever doing the test, and I saw that happen, I'd start shooting right. I wouldn't have hesitated. I would just go, just kill the guy, because now he's in the zone. And when he's in the zone, it's like you become fucking superhuman. I don't know how to explain. It's what Miyamoto Musashi calls this the void. It's one page in his book. But I have personally experienced that a number of times in my life in very serious situations. And it's like, it's so difficult to this, you know, one thing I can talk about, it was like in Japan, I had like, I hadn't got a black belt yet, it was just before that. And I had major injuries. I had like broken hands and like fucked up toes and bust, you know, I was fucked because they were like beating the shit out of me every day to like trying to break me down for the black belt. And went to Japan, there's 500 people there, and the main guy, the main Japanese teacher is a guy that was the captain of I forget the name of it, Kokyushu University. I forget how to pronounce it. The main university of karate training in Japan. He was the captain of that team, and merciless. They basically kill a guy every 2 or 3 years there. And the last time they killed the guy while he was in Seiza. In other words, he wanted to leave, and they're like, "Oh, you got weak spirit," and they kicked him while he was just sitting down, kneeling, not replying anything, and they kicked him to death. And he was the captain at that time. Completely like hardcore merciless guy. Imagine, you know, the scene in Gladiator when they're just about to enter and everybody's just scared and pissing themselves, and the main gladiator's guy like, "Get a hold of yourself." That's kind of how it was. There's 500 people in the room. So this merciless guy goes like, "Okay," and he's trying to explain a concept of like hardcore fighting, proper like hardcore, you know, karate do supposed to be no contact, but in the dojo, you know, if you're fighting in the dojo and a guy pulls your eye out and you don't say, you know, you don't tap out, he's gonna pull your eye out. That's like, so that's the environment. And this guy, he's the main dude, and he goes, "Okay, I need 2 volunteers to demonstrate this principle of like hardcore fighting." I jumped up and I ran because I thought, fuck, there's 500 people, you know, I gotta like get here first. And I'm like, shh, I got to the line. I was like, cool, I made it, you know. And I was faster than everybody else. Like, okay, now I get to like get some proper training. And then I had to wait like 2-3 minutes for anybody else to stand up. And while I'm waiting, I start to realize, you know, I'm like, where the fuck is everybody? How rude are they? And then I realized, oh, fuck, they're terrified. Everybody here is fucking scared out of their mind. And eventually, this German guy gets up, who's already a black belt. I don't know, first dan, second dan, third dan, I don't know. He's a foot taller than I am. Same sort of build, you know, he's a pretty solidly built guy, but like he's a foot taller than I am and proportionally longer, bigger. And he was like, he comes up, and actually, as he comes up, you can see he's tense. You know, he's like, okay, I'm going to do this. You know, I'm the man. I'm going to face this fucker. You know, in his head, this is all going on, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay, you know, he looks like a good dude. He looks like a good fighter. Cool. You know, Hajime, start. I go into like, you know, punch and kick, which is my move. But I'm not there to like hurt the guy. I'm there to perform as well as I can in my most perfect move, you know, my most perfect controlled thing. I was gonna just punch and stop just shy of his skin, and my kick was like to like hit his stomach, but just touch it, you know. But I'm going as fast as I can, and he blocked my kick with his knee, which is, in a street fight, of course you can do that, but you know, we're not here to kill each other. That was like my intent was like to perform as perfectly as you can, as hard as you can, as fast as you can, but correctly. He blocked my kick with his knee, which bust my foot there and then. And he punched me, and thank fuck, I've got quick reflexes because I ducked. And his elbow was by my ear. I mean, if the guy had hit me, he would have taken my head off. He literally, you know, basically like my face was like up against his shoulder. the captain, this main head honcho, like merciless Japanese guy was like, yeah, man. So we go back to the line, and I'm like, I'm now fucking scared, right? I'm really kind of terrified, because I'm like, fuck, I came here to do things correctly. This guy just broke my foot. As we walked back to the line, I looked at my foot, and it was already swelling up and purple. So my foot's fucked, right? And this guy just narrowly missed removing my head from my shoulders. And I'm like, fuck me. I don't know how, and I realized this guy is good. I managed to duck his punch, but he's good enough. He's not going to be like, it's not something I can just go like, ha, tap, 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 and like get out the way. He's like good enough that it's like, fuck, I don't know that I can hold him off without, like, he's going to hurt me, and I don't really know what to do. And I was like getting scared, and at the same time, I can feel the main captain guy like a hawk looking at a little scared rabbit going, oh, I can almost feel him thinking, oh, look, the Baka guy Jing is afraid. We must crush him. I can feel this like intense like scrutiny of like my cowardice or fear or whatever. And I'm in my head, I'm like, like, how the fuck do I stop this guy? And like, I can do this, I can't do that, I can't run away. And then it's just like, and then just wait. And I went, wait a minute. What the fuck am I doing? This guy is trying to take my head off. I don't owe him jack shit. I'm going to take his head off. He's got no rules. Now I've got no rules. And my fear just disappeared, because now it's just a free-for-all. There's no more rules. We're not playing nice. It's not following the Geneva Convention. This is like total war, German boy that's a foot taller than me. And I know that as good as this guy is, I know that I'm better with like one or two things. And I know that I'm going to catch him. The next move, it doesn't matter what he does, he's not going to hit me, and I'm going to put my arm all the way through his head. And if he's not down, I'm going to headbutt him, and I'm going to jump on top of him and bite his fucking throat up, then poke his eyes out. If that's what I need to do, I'm not, in my head, in that moment, it was like, I'm not going to stop until they physically remove me from his fucking face. That's it. There was no fear, not even a hint. I was like, oh, okay, this is the game we're playing? All right. And then I was like, now I'm like waiting for Hajime. Okay. And I'm like, I wait, and I wait. And I'm like, to the point where like, now I feel I don't feel the main honcho dude like looking at me anymore like a hawk. And I'm like, to the point where I look at the main scariest Japanese guy that you've ever seen in your life. And he's not a small man, by the way. And I looked at him. This is how unscared I was, right? This guy's terrifying 500 people in the room. And I'm not going to lie, and a normal thing is a pretty intimidating individual. I wasn't afraid of him because samurai, right? But I looked at him like, huh. I even went like this to him, like, the fuck, dude? It's like, I'm telling the main honcho, dude, go, I want to take this guy out. And he felt the whole thing. I absolutely know this guy knew exactly what was going on. And he was like, oh, yeah, man. Okay, you can sit down. There's no need. It's fine. You can sit down now. You learn. And he called some other guy up. And I know why he did that. He did that because I learned the lesson. He knew I learned the lesson. He knew I wasn't like weak or cowardly. He said, no, this guy's got it. Now, if I make them fight, all that's going to happen is one of them, the German guy, I'm absolutely certain. But anyway, regardless, one of them is going to fucking end up in hospital for sure, because this guy, the German guy maybe doesn't stop, maybe does, but this guy is not going to quit until he's removed the guy's head from his neck. So he's like, okay, and he did that to me twice. The second time there was another encounter, and I went up like, and now I went up ready like, whatever the other guy does, If he behaves well, he behaves well. If he doesn't behave well, I'm going to take his head off. And the second time, he didn't even let me do the fight. He goes like, oh, you've already been fighting quite a bit. Okay, you can sit down. Yeah, like so. And so to answer your question, it's like, there was, you're thinking, how does this relate to the paradox of no desire? From total fear, total desire, total wanting this, that, and not wanting to be there, to like, total acceptance of this is the way. And when you are in that this is the way, you can't really lose. Now, in Systema, I talk about this in the book as well and in the videos. And if you got the Systema book, you will see this. There is also in combat, there is a, this is going to sound like woo-woo bullshit. So, people are not going to understand this. They're going to say I'm talking shit and whatever. But the thing, and it's, funnily enough, it's in a book about ants. I can't remember the name. It's a very famous book, but written by a French guy. But it's all about an ant colony and how the ants are. And there's like this old antler that says, well, all you need to do in a fight to win the fight is decide that you've won the fight. And that's it. And it sounds like absolute bullshit, but it's true. I learned this in Systema, that like when a guy is going to hit you, if you're intent, if you've got absolute decision in your head that that blow is irrelevant to you, then you're going to be able to take it. And then I have an example of this where one of the guys in Canada that I went training with, and I was struggling with taking hits, like in Systema you don't really block, you just take the hits sort of and you move your body. And I was like, the sternum area here, my sternum had been cracked, broken, and my solar plexus been hit very hard many times in like pretty serious situations. So it was like instinctive to like not be able to take a blow there properly. And I was trying to explain to him like, I don't know how to get rid of this like fear that I have in my body here, and I'm not being able to block punches correctly. And he goes, okay, look, I explained this to you now. I'll show you. Okay, you stand in front of me. I'm going to punch you. You do what you need to do, right? Now, I'm going to punch you. And the reason, that you're going to take this punch is because you're protecting an empty parking spot. You're protecting a parking spot for your friend who's coming to park his car. And I'm going to punch you, to take your parking spot. So he gave the punch, and I was like, I was gone. I was out the way. He didn't touch me. I was like, I don't give a fuck about a parking spot. What are you talking about? I'm not going to take a punch for that shit. He goes, very good. Good movement. He goes, okay, now again. Now I'm going to punch you, and behind you, I was not married. I didn't have children at this time. And he said, but now behind you is your wife and your child, okay? And if you move out the way, I'm going to hit them with this punch, and I'm going to fucking punch you. And I put that image, that thing, I made that real in my head. I was like, okay, this is the training. And he punched me, he gave me a good, it just bounced, I didn't feel shit. It just bounced off me. I was just like, I'm like, And he goes, do you understand now? And I was like, oh, thank you. It was like, there's no need to get punched. But if you do need to get punched, there's no need for you to get punched, if you know what I mean. So it's a very paradoxical thing, but absolutely necessary to understand and to learn and to experience. You have to experience this for you to begin to play with it. And you can only experience that by trying to put yourself in that situation as many times as possible. I hope I've answered the question again, as usual. If I'm not, guys, just, fire again. On a related point, does the amount of desire affect the efficacy? Does any bad desire disqualify? Is it a matter of degree? Desire must be at least 50% good, or 1%, or 99%. That's a very binary autistic way of asking things. So I'm going to say a tentative yes in inverted commas, because obviously, if you are a child molester that is praying for you to get some little children to rape to death, my sense of it is that it's not going to be the Catholic God that might answer that prayer. The other guy might, but but it's a very binary way of thinking, because there is also, that's why most people don't understand this. Is you can measure prayer scientifically, but it's a very complex and very riddled with variables affair. So it's not easy to come to, very clear conclusions. But yes, at the same time, I absolutely do not want anyone to interpret this as in, well, my child is dying of cancer, and I prayed and I really tried to not have desire, and then my child died, so it must have been because I prayed badly. That is an absolute twisting and evil interpretation of what I'm trying to explain here. It's absolutely not that. There are multiple factors, so you can't ascribe that to this or that situation, and each individual is completely separate, and the free will affects them in a different, separate way. You don't know, and you might never know, or you might figure it out later. You know, if your child does or did die of cancer, and God forbid it happens, I don't wish that on anybody, of course, but say something like that happens, the reasons may be completely evil, and yet God can twist that around so that some good comes of it. I'm reminded, I did a blog post on the guy Mo from Google that's talking about AI, and his son died as a result of an appendicitis operation going wrong, which is like, what the fuck? You know, it's a basic operation, nothing wrong should have happened. But he was saying so many good things came out of that as a result of my son dying. I realized many things, and I did many things that I think changed people's perceptions about all sorts of things so much. And that he's, you know, if you're cynical, you're going to say, oh, well, you know, he had to come up with some reason why that would be a good thing, or would have some good effects at the very least, in order to not go crazy. Because, you know, if you're an atheist, you probably would go crazy. So, but it's a tautological sort of thinking, because you can say, oh, well, he had to believe that to make himself feel better. But at the same time, when he does believe that, things are better. So, you know, it's difficult for you to prove it to an outside person that what you're doing is objectively reasonable. The outside person will always see it as a subjective tendency that you have. I call this process subjective objectivity, because, for example, my road to Damascus moment was absolutely objective, 100% provable to me that it was objective. But if you haven't lived my life, if you haven't had my experiences, if you haven't lived through the things that I lived through, you can never appreciate that what happened to me was objective. Because to you, it's just a story. To you, it's just a probability. To you, it's just an event that I'm telling you about, that I may be mistaken about, unwittingly mistaken about, to the point that I'm fooling myself, or that I'm believing a coincidence to be more meaningful than what it is. All these things are true for you as an outsider, but they're absolutely not possible or true for me as the guy who went through that pathway. So it's like saying, let's say a guy in scuba gear gets trapped under a rock and he runs out of oxygen for 6 minutes, and then he, you know, he's unconscious, he pops out to the top of the water, and he starts to breathe again, and he's alive, and he's not brain damaged, you know. And people are going to be like, oh, well, you know, we don't believe him, or he wasn't under there for 6 minutes, or maybe there was a bubble of air trapped in his fucking mask or whatever, or no, maybe it's because the water was cold, that's why he's not brain damaged. And they're going to have all sorts of answers and whatever. But the guy that happened to, his experience of it, his reality of it, on a factual basis, I'm not talking about on a deluded or mistaken, on an actual factual basis, is not something that you can relate to in a way that is objective. So his reality is closer to the truth than yours could ever be. That's, I don't know if I'm explaining that. Tell me if that makes any answer. TVC, the answer doesn't need to be as autistic as the question. Well, it does, my autist little friend, because otherwise you're going to come up with another autist question, and then I have to answer that one, and then that one, and you know how it goes. Bing Bing Wahoo says, love that movie. He's talking about Equilibrium. Yeah, I do as well. It's one of my favorite films. It was one of my favorite films, not because the plot line is absurd, but the shift that the guy does from hardcore to flexible is this shift I did from karate to Sistema. So it was personally very meaningful and very, very well. Whoever did that film, I don't know, knows something quite deep about martial arts. So whoever wrote it, or whoever, you know, played it out that way. And I know that Christian Bale does martial arts, practice martial arts well for many years. Caleb says, just getting started on the stream after Mass. Happy Father's Day to all who qualify. Thank you, sir. James Tong. Oh, hi, James. Thank you for the sponsorship of the tree. You're on the schedule now, and I've updated it. I'm mentioning your name because you are not anonymous, so James says, is there a paradox in praying for someone who is sick to get better, if it is part of God's will for someone to be sick for a while? No, there's no paradox, because you don't know the form that will take. It's a bit Protestantly puritanical to say, well, they're dying of cancer, but I'm not going to pray for them because it's God's will. You don't know. You don't know what God's will is. Maybe God's will is that you pray for them so they get better. That might be the lesson. Might be for you. You don't know. So it's never wrong to pray for other people. It's never wrong to pray even for evil fuckers to become better. I personally, if I were to pray for, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, I would pray that they die in a fiery pit of boiling shit and are there for eternity. That's my prayer for them. But I'm a nasty guy. I'm not a very good Catholic. Just Catholic. I'm not a very good one. But, if somebody were so inclined to pray for those two people to become saved and, find the truth, it's commendable. I certainly would not tell them not to do that or think that doing that is wrong. It's not for me, but, it's never wrong to pray for somebody who's sick. Absolutely not. I think it's a very commendable thing to do, and I do it. Sometimes I do it for total strangers. I read about some little kid that's ill, or some person that's had something bad happen to them, and I pray for them. I don't have to tell anybody about it or whatever. It's like I literally say a prayer for them. Which reminds me, James, I've changed all the sheets, but I still have to do your Hail Marys. I will do them today, and I couldn't write to you because I didn't have an email or whatever. So if you're that way inclined, ping me an email. I will make it so that you can, so that I can send you an email when 3 years from now pass or whatever, I do keep a list of it so that when the thing comes, I'll let you have first options if you want them. TVC says, remember Christ's prayer in the garden. If this cup can be passed from me, but not mine, but thy will be done. Exactly that. Exactly that. Sometimes it's very hard to keep that in mind, thy will be done. Sometimes it's like, but I want this, But that has to be, it certainly has got easier for me over the years to think that way. Even when I wasn't baptized, I used to pray daily for my daughter, and it's like, literally multiple times a day, every day, I'd pray. Not very well, particularly. I was, full of anxiety and fear for her and worry. But I did pray every day for her, and every day what I prayed was pretty much along the lines of like, please protect her and make me as I need to be better for her. And your will be done, not mine. But I was saying that with a lot of anxiety and fear and worry, that now, that sort of situation is a lot easier for me to trust God with. And really do, not like lip service, like, oh, thy will be done. I really hope it's my will, but, I'm going to say the words, I said the words, that thy will be done, so don't punish me. Not that way at all. Genuinely, like, you know best. And I might suffer like a dying dog, but actually you know best. So I've got this situation, please sort it out. You know best how. That kind of feeling is a lot easier to have, after a few years of being Catholic and seeing the results of it. Essentially, I'm a pretty skeptical guy, but not in a autistic way. I'm skeptical because it's like I'm an observer. I observe reality, and most of reality is in the world. So I was very good at moving around in the world, but that's not. The world is, remember, is a subset. It's the sewer of reality. You've got spiritual reality, which is the world, and then in the undercurrents, you've got where we are, the sewer lines. So we're the rats running around in human shit. That's kind of where we are. But if you understand that there's a whole other world up there that informs this one, you can at least find the grey water lines where it's not actual sewage water, it's just storm water. It's a much better way to live. So I don't know if my analogies are making sense, but I want to touch on one other point while you guys can fire any more questions you've got. One other point that's very, very, I think, pertinent and interesting. I got a very interesting little string of emails from a guy from Social Galactic. Very nice guy, nice man, very, very supportive guy. You know, he forwards and repeats my reposts my comments on Social Galactic and possibly elsewhere, and you know, I appreciate that very much. And he wrote to me about this group that these guys, that it's kind of like the Saint Posenti. There's one of the guys that used to be one of the ilk, and I don't know if he's still around because he got sick, but anyway, he started, you know, there's this book, the monks or whatever of Saint Posenti, is a fiction book about these guys who like all get together and they form this sort of monastery of multi-denominational, you know, Catholic, Orthodox, and they're all there, but we're all hardcore Christians. And he was basically saying, oh, look, this guy wrote this whole blog post about doing this, and how would it work, and what would the rules be? And he's like, I thought this might be interesting for you. And I was like, it's absolutely got no interest for me whatsoever, because it's nonsense. It's LARPing at being Christian. And he was like, you know, we went backwards and forwards on a few times, and I explained to him, I was like, look, I'm not trying to be insulting, but you need to understand, Catholics actually believe their religion. And in our religion, first of all, there's no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. And mixing in with heretics is, again, my analogy is, how much sewage is okay to have in your ice cream? And my answer is nil. I am never going to be part of some multi-denominational situation because, oh, but you'd get more people to your side, and maybe you could convert more people to sedevacantism. And I'm like, look, this is not a popularity contest. You know, it's like if you ask a mathematician, look, can't we just say 2 + 2 is 5? Just this once, just this one time, just in this one problem. If we could just say 2 + 2 is 5 in just this one problem, it solves the problem. No, fuck you, die. Okay, that's kind of, there's no sedevacantist that is going to tell you, oh, it's okay to, like, you know, form some kind of a monastery of like guys that are all thinking the same. And it's never going to work. Never. That other guy, he actually, I think, incorporated some kind of order of Saint Posenti or whatever. First of all, you cannot have an order of anything unless a pope approves it, and there's been no valid living pope since 1958, so you're not going to have any order. What you can have is associations of laymen that decide to come together for whatever purposes, but they're not going to be official, they're unofficial, and they can have a name, they can make up whatever name, but it's not an official thing recognized by the church, because the church currently is without a pope, and therefore the jurisdiction, which is all totally belongs to the pope, no one has jurisdiction. They can all perform the sacraments, priests and bishops, and as laymen we can receive them and we behave as Catholics, but there is no pope that can say, yeah, you can create this order or whatever. So, and you need to understand, you know, like it's very difficult for non-Christians to understand this, and that means Protestants. Protestants are not Christians. Orthodox are not Christians. You must understand that there is only one Christian, and that is Christianity is Catholicism. Catholicism is Christianity. And if you don't accept these things as real, you are not a Christian. You're not a Catholic, you're not a Christian. It's that simple. And if you're not a sedevacantist in today's day and age, you're not a Christian, because the Bergoglian Novus Ordo nonsense, that's not Christianity. There's actually a brilliant little meme, which, let me see if I still have it on my phone. Actually, you guys just reminded me, I was gonna post this on the blog. Let me see if I can see it, if I've got it here somewhere. No, not that. I don't know if I saved it, or let me just see. Just writing it very small. Give me a second. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So it's like things Jesus never said. The only way baptism works is if you get completely under the water. Hey guys, come back. I was kidding about eat my flesh, drink my blood stuff. Yeah, sure. I gave Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven, but they don't open anything. I had a whole bunch of them made up and at the hardware store, and I gave them out to everybody who wants to invent their own church. They're just for show. Okay, I'm giving you guys my authority. You can preach, teach, heal the sick, but it's only good until you die. You can't pass it down to anyone, just you 12. Wait, just you 11. We're down to 11, right? You can run my church, but only until Martin Luther comes along. Then he's in charge. It's like, that's why I'm saying, Catholicism, Protestantism makes absolutely no sense. It's ridiculous. A child can understand that it's absolute nonsense. So that's why I'm saying, look, if you are not a Christian, you can't understand Christianity. A Christian understands that, well, that's the truth. Those are the rules. You can't just pick and choose which one you like, so it's like, oh, but we can all come together. We're all Christians. No, you're not. That's literally the equivalent of somebody saying, hey, let's all play basketball. The golf guys and the rugby guys and the football guys and the guys who play pelota and the guys who play tennis, we're all on the same court and we're all going to play the game of basketball because we're all basketballians. We all play with balls and it's a nice court and we can just make the rules like fit for every... So you got a guy that plays golf and a guy that plays rugby, a guy that actually plays basketball, a guy that plays pelota and a guy that plays badminton and a guy that plays tennis, but we're all on the same team and we're all playing basketball. No, you're fucking not. You LARPing moron. So, Sam says, yes, please post that. You mean the little meme I just read out? I will. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I will post it. It's a very funny meme. Do you guys get where I'm coming from? It really doesn't matter if you believe Catholicism or not. You need to understand, even if you're completely outside of Catholicism, if you understand what Catholicism is, which you should, because why shouldn't you? Okay? It doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. It's the same thing like, do I understand Shintoism? Yes, I do. Do I understand maths? Yes, I do. Do I understand, whatever, the rules of grammar? Yes, I do. I purposely break some of them when I write books. So it doesn't mean that I necessarily have to agree with them. But do I understand the actual, what Catholicism is and what Catholicism believes? If you do, then don't come and say stupid shit to me. Like, if I'm playing basketball, don't come and tell me, but I'm a basketballian, just like you. Look, I've got my 9-iron here and my golf balls, and I've got my studded shoes, and I'm just like you. We're basketballians. No, you're not. Get the fuck off my court. It's like, it's not hard to understand. Mark says, did charlatan and the orthodontist sphere run their mouths again? I'm not sure who charlatan is and orthodontist sphere run their mouth again. No, I was saying this was just an exchange of an email from a very nice man. I've got nothing against him, but he's clearly from a Protestant background, and he's sort of saying, hey, these guys are all coming together. It's a little bit like we're all on the right, so we should all stick together. No, wait a fucking minute. You're an actual neo-Nazi that believes neo-Nazi shit that some of it is completely repulsive to me, regardless of, what the real history was. And you are a complete fucking, I don't know, racist to the extent that you're like, if you judge every individual on the color of their skin, regardless of I understand statistics, so I've got no problem with statistical models of racist people, whatever, IQ. But, if you're going to tell me that it is a sin for any, I don't know, white man to be with a non-white woman or whatever, that's just fucking retarded. I'm not going to subscribe to that kind of philosophy, which doesn't mean that I think that, having millions of Africans coming to Belgium or whatever is the best thing for Belgium or the Africans, So, nation states should be nation states, but there's always going to be a little bit of tiny bits of fuzziness here and there. The point is, it's like, understand what the rules are. I'm not going to go to It'd be like saying, look, 2 plus 2 is 5. It's still numbers. We're all doing numbers. It's okay. You don't have to be so stuck on 2 plus 2 being 4. It's like you don't understand. Like the whole concept of 2 plus 2 is 4 is the whole point. So James goes, another question. Is it more effective to say particular prayers to particular saints for particular issues or intentions than to pray the Hail Mary alone, or another prayer we're familiar with? I'm not a big believer in a specific prayer for a specific thing. I very much stick to Romans 14:14 for that, which is very much a go-to. It's one of the few passages of the Bible that I know by heart, Romans 14:14, which is, if it makes it easier for you to pray to a specific saint in terms of intercession, because remember, we don't actually pray to the saint. We're basically saying, hey, buddy, can you pray for me? Can you intercede for me? The same way like you do to your friend. You say, like, dude, pray for me. Like, can you pray for me? It's the same thing. So just to be clear for the Protestants. So if there is a particular saint that you think you've got more of an affinity with or whatever, and that makes it easier for you to pray correctly, remember, without fear, without desire, so on, then by all means, that may well be more effective. I don't particularly, especially if it's something important to me, I very often don't have even a prayer with words. I don't, I will generally say Hail Mary or Our Father or whatever, but almost as a contorno, how do you say, as a frame for the actual issue. When I'm really, really trying to connect and have a proper prayer, it's almost like a wordless, because it's all about sensation and feeling, and I try and get it like as still as possible inside myself, and then I try and stay there considering the effect or mercy or peace that I'm looking for, and I actually begin to inhabit and have that peace or mercy or whatever inside me as a thing that's already there. It's very hard to describe in words. It's a wordless process mostly for me. And it's like I said, it's like if you're in that spiritual realm, you don't go like, I want to get that. You just like, oh, you center yourself and the thing comes to you. It just appears. It's that sort of a feeling a lot more. Does that explain it? I'm not big on like having to verbalize things, and maybe you are. Maybe some people have to verbalize things. Maybe some people have to have an image in their head. I'm a very tactile person. In neurolinguistic programming, they teach you like the people that are like more visual, the people that are more auditory, the people that are more kinesthetic, or you've also got taste and so on. But generally, the three modalities that people have are like visual, auditory, or tactile. And for a long time, people, including myself, didn't really know what I was coming out in this test like really weird. Like visual was actually my least important. Auditory seemed to be the one, and the tactile, like people just couldn't figure it out. And eventually I did figure it out, and it's like the people that were making the tests are like your average 120 IQ people. My kinesthetic ability and kinesthetic perception was way beyond the top level of what they were measuring for. So I was getting results that didn't make sense to them, because I was answering other questions that would be like visually or auditory. I was answering from a kinesthetic basis, which meant they weren't really for me. When I started to realize that, and then I started to consider that, it suddenly opened up a whole world of information that I was getting that nobody knew I was getting. So I hope that clears it up a bit. So for me, being very kinesthetic, I don't need language. I don't need words, which is an auditory/digital thing. I don't need a vision. I sometimes get little flashes of things, but for me, it's mostly a sensation. But you might be different, You might be a very visual person, and you might need the icons of Mary and Jesus and a cross in front of you and a whole little altar to go with it. For me, it's a sensation. Even when I'm in a church or whatever, in a field that has one of those little shrines, to me, sometimes a little shrine in the middle of a forest is far more evocative of proper sacred space than certainly than a giant church with like a lot of bustling and going to and fro. Sometimes just sitting under a tree in the grass is more sacramental in my perception of it than going into a church. Generally, Catholic churches do have a sensation of there is a sense of what do you call it, of the numinous, even in the corrupted and polluted and desacralized churches that we have now because of the Novus Ordo. There is still an underlying hint of like this was a sacred place. This place had something. So it's interesting. I'm getting more people coming in, so I'm happy to keep talking on this topic. And if you guys want to change, whatever. It's now free for all. You can fire whatever questions you want, whatever comments you want, whatever topics you want. So cheers while I take another sip. I only had a little half glass, but it is quite hot. Maybe it's getting to me. If you bear with me, so there's 16 of you, think up of something you want to talk about or ask. I'm gonna open the window, and I'm also gonna fire up the mosquito repellent because the mosquitoes are pretty hazardous. So give me a minute. I'm coming back. Think up of some questions or topics. Se puoi, ma però dimmelo se... All right, here, breathing in some healthy poison and keep the mozzies away from me. All right, I'm reading through the article now. Okay, good. That guy says for sure. Look at the nice smoky. All right, let me just catch up here. Another question that makes sense. Oh, okay. No, there's no more new bit. DTTW says, will you be engaging at all with AI like in Vox's Quantum Mortis or Kitsun Chia's Singularity Sunrise? And in that vein, will you be writing your books in the future? Yes, I have. Book number 3 is now coming back up on my mind on the Overlords of Mars series. That book 2 ended with the encounter with the moon Nazis. I had started book 3. Sometimes things happen for a reason. It's been 10 years since I've touched that book. I am gonna start it again because in the intervening 10 years, I have made some very potent realizations and discoveries. Sorry, I'm just trying to not get the ash all over the floor here. That inform what that book should really be more like. So, pardon me. So yes, I will definitely write my books, but keep in mind that the Overlords of Mars series is set in, I think the current timeline is towards the end of 1999. So the concept of AI in that is not really one of the main plot lines in there at all. There are elements of it, but it's not. As far as AI in the future or in my life or in my writing goes, I predict, I may be wrong, but I predict that in the future, which might be a week from now or it might be 20 years from now, I will probably go completely dark. There will probably come a point where I don't even use computers anymore. I'll go back to typewriters. Um, and I will have no digital equipment in my home. I think that there is the possibility of that happening, and there is also the possibility of me, with any luck, starting a community that I hope will become quite big, that is very much on those lines. And no, we will not be like the Amish. We will be something that has never been seen before. We will be completely new, completely different, and not unwilling to use technology, but making conscious choices about which technology to use and in what way and how. And I also believe that the technology that we would be researching and developing and using is of a completely different order than the technology that we are now, that everybody thinks is the only technology. It is not. There are alternative technologies that were known about in the distant past that I think we can have access to, and we can develop in a way that is far more holistic and very powerful, by the way. Whether we get to do that or not, it's a very good question. We might be wiped out before that. There are very advanced technologies that can be used for very nefarious reasons that can basically wipe out pretty much anybody, anywhere, anytime, if that's, if they're that way inclined. But at the same time, if you become useful enough, people tend to either leave you alone or try and like make a deal with you, So who knows? And again, it's not a it's not a game of numbers. Remember, 11 scared men and 4 women changed the world. Yeah, it took a couple of thousand, a couple thousand years or whatever, but they did. And I'm not in this for the short run. I'm not worried about when I die. I mean, obviously, I'm concerned about my children, and I hope they'll do well even after I'm gone and whatever. But ultimately, I'm a soldier in the forever army. I'm not worried. What am I worried about? So I hope that explains the question about AI. I don't think AI is going to be particularly relevant to my life. I understand how people are scared of it, and possibly rightly so. But again, it's a choice, and like, look, and look, don't get me wrong, right? There are elements of this which are going to be very physical, very real. Excuse me. For example, in Singapore, you've got the robot dogs going up to people and say, keep your distance, you're not within 2 meters from other people. And it's like, and if the guy doesn't step away, then, he's like face recognition thing, and he gets social credit drops and whatever. But if and when that starts to happen, here, I fully expect that those robot dogs are going to turn up blown up a lot of the time, and then they're going to have armed robot dogs, and then it'll be a resistance fight. I don't know, it may well go all the way to like Skynet sort of stuff, but I don't care what the consequences are. I don't care if they wipe me out. I'm never going to submit to that shit. So, and I'm never going to use it. Now I'm watching with a lot of interest. I'm watching the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict because of that, because the Ukrainians are just getting completely fucking slaughtered. And if you look at the videos of like drones dropping little grenades on them, and fucking tanks and anti-aircraft cannon, artillery and whatever, they're just getting fucking wrecked. And it's like, well, what if you had to be one of these Ukrainian soldiers, and you're like in a fucking trench, and you're as camouflaged as you can be, and these drones just like picking you out, like as if you're a flaming, like, here I am. So it's like, how do you fight against that shit? What if it comes down to that? I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I also know that the Ukrainians are being used like cannon fodder, so it's not, they're certainly not got the best minds of military combat going on there. So there is we're now in 5th generation warfare, which is total warfare, which is, 4th generation warfare was essentially guerrilla warfare. Fifth generation warfare is kind of like guerrilla warfare, but like using economics, cyber attacks, and technology and digital stuff and everything at once. I think there is a 6G, if I want to call it that, warfare, sixth generation warfare, which is, I haven't how do I say, I haven't like formed this enough in my mind to give a decent snapshot breakdown of what I mean by it. You know, it would take me a while to like put it down in words in a way that makes sense to an external person, but I believe there is definite 6G warfare, and it's a very advanced concept, and I think it's something that would be very difficult for most people to consider. But I think it's a concept that, if understood, would be almost impossible to block against. That's all I can say right now. It's very theoretical at the moment, but I believe it has very realistic, real-world applications. Merg says, when you talk about holding the wished-for outcome inside you, but without expressly asking for it, would actively stopping yourself from visualizing the outcome help? No, it's not that you're not asking for it. You have a sense of the outcome you would like to have, but instead of like being, I want that, it's more like, this is inside me and it is your will, and I have this peace that comes from trusting you and loving you, and I know you love me and you want the best for me, and I'm sensing this thing as good, and you are good, and you are God, and it is your will, not mine. Does that make sense? It's a little bit of hypnosis inducing language there, but hopefully that helps a little bit. Backstabber says, simple question, when is too much autism dangerous? I mean, for prayers or absorbing doctrine, like Fenites with baptismal desire or baptismal blood, coming close to salvation by faith alone. How much autism is too much autism? Any? All? You know, it depends on what you're looking at. What I've said, I think it's video number 4 on my YouTube channel. Go to look at video number 4. That is a very important video for understanding Asperger's / autism on the spectrum, and how it relates to IQ and how that relates to your effect in the world. Sometimes a tiny bit of autism is enough to like wreck your life, and sometimes a good amount of autism will make your life great. It depends on the situation. It depends on the, for example, a recent let me backtrack. So I used to have these conversations with this Orthodox Jewish guy like 25, 30 years ago, and we have actually reconnected recently online, where we'd argue philosophy and so on. And you know, we used to discuss knowledge, and we developed our own language, as you do if you're actually doing proper philosophy, where we talked about knowledge and knowledge. So knowledge is something you can know, something that you intellectually agree with, something that you know is correct, is one thing. Knowledge is like, that thing is fucking true, you know, it's real. So you can have knowledge that shooting somebody will kill them, and then you have knowledge when you've blown somebody away by shooting them in the face and it's sprayed all over the room. You know, it's like, there are two different levels of knowledge, right? Now, so when you talk about, so the realization I had, for example, in communication between generally male and female people, and I've said this before, I've had this knowledge for many, many, many years that, you know, essentially women are incapable of being honest. That's from the perspective of the male, right? Because male thinking, male logic is like black, white, yes, no. 2 plus 2 is 4, and so on. And it is absolutely correct. It's logical. You need to have that way of thinking to get out of the fucking caves, right? If we didn't have that level of thinking, we would be animals in the wild, foraging dirt every day. And if the way that women think was the only way that existed in the world, we would be animals in the forest, foraging like, wild pigs or whatever. But said like that sounds like, oh, you hate women, you think they're inferior. No, that's not the point. Again, to go back to the question on neuropsychology, it's real, because pay attention. A woman's way of considering reality is not linear. It is an amorphous fog. Now, if you get enough fog in an area, then it becomes black, as in you can't see past it. And then if the fog dissipates, it becomes clear, as in you can see through it. But it's gradations of things, and it can change from moment to the other. While with a man, it's more like the light's on or the light's off. So when these two people are trying to communicate, it's hell, because one person appears to be deceptive to the other, and the other person appears to be deceptive to the first. And you kind of need both, because why is a woman like that? A woman is like that because ultimately a woman is solipsistic, and a woman has to be solipsistic to survive and to survive her children. And keep in mind, if there's like 20 men and 20 women, and 18 of those men die, the tribe doesn't end. Those 2 men can impregnate those 20 women, no problem. But if you've got 20 men, 20 women, and 18 women die, that tribe is probably going to disappear, because there's only 2 women left. They can only have 1 kid at a time each, and there's like 20 guys fighting over them. So the woman is more valuable biologically, as a biological entity. The female of the species in the human race is more valuable than the man. The man is expendable to a much higher degree than the woman. And being more expendable, certain physiological, neurological things become true. There's a brilliant little clip that I forwarded to some friends of mine on Telegram. It's hilarious. And it's like boys versus girls on some survival island thing. It's just, it's really funny. Like the guys are just like, they're doing everything cool. They're getting food. They're eating crocodiles, fish. They're building their house. No issues. The women are it's just a collapse, a total societal collapse within like day one. It's quite funny because, again, the biblical model of family is actually obviously absolutely correct. The man has to be the head of the household, because that's how the household survives and thrives, and that's how society survives and thrives. And the woman has to be the homemaker and looking at the details. And I was talking about this with my wife, and I was like, look, you understand that you're worried about the color of the car. I'm worried about does the fucking engine work? And she's like, yeah, but the way you are so utilitarian, and like, like you might buy a shitty colored car just because it works better. And I'm like, do you realize what you just said? It's like priorities, right? I've seen this in construction every time, without fail. If you're in construction, in building, in like showing people houses or buildings or potentials, and there's a woman watching the house or looking at the house, and I've moved like 54 times in 53 years, right? So I've had moved with, without girlfriends, wives, etc. You go into a place, and the things that women look at are completely, 100%, absolutely irrelevant to a guy. She'd be like, oh no, I don't like this place, it's got grey walls. And you're like, it's a 4-bedroom house at half the price of anything else. There's no mold, everything works, and it's got a swimming pool. What the fuck? Oh, but the walls are grey. It just gives me a bad feeling. You're like, and I'd much rather the other place, with the pastel green colors, like 2 square meter kitchen and only 2 bedrooms, but it's on the 4th floor in a really nice area, and the neighbors are like famous. Like a man that's a man is just like, why are you insane? What the fuck is wrong with you? So, but the thing is, the intention of the female isn't necessarily dishonest. She can have behaviors that for a man are absolutely objectively dishonest, right? that doesn't mean she is intentionally trying to be dishonest. And if you are able, as a man, which if you're a little bit autistic or Asperger's like me, we're talking miracle level of evolution, right? But if as a man you're able to make allowance for their global inconsistency and you make a big enough net, within those parameters, their foggy movement is actually logical. It has an actual logic that you can perceive. It's not a logic that you can see if you're looking at it through a lens this big, but if you're looking at it, you know, like sort of Hubble telescope sized, then there's patterns, there's statistical patterns which are reliable. And then you can have meaningful communication. So, I hope that answers the question about what level of autism is important. I don't know if it's a direct answer. Maybe I haven't answered that. I don't know. Tell me. Roshi Strider says, was thinking about reading some G.K. Chesterton. His quote about people fighting over whether the leaves are green in summer seemed very accurate. Don't know much about the guy. What are his best works? Look, just pick anything by Chesterton. I don't know. I don't have a best works by Chesterton in my head. Literally everything I read, anything I read by Chesterton is always mind-blowingly good. You know, just Google it and pick a topic that you think might be more interesting to you. Honestly, he's a brilliant writer. Is because he was Catholic, so he's still out there. You know, I feel him smiling at me. Merg says also, but how much of conventional wisdom or established thinking with regards to history is outright lies? A lot. I have a hard time trusting canned platitudes regarding history in light of conspiracies. Absolutely, you must investigate it for yourself. Generally speaking, older texts tend to be a little bit more accurate. Like, for example, The Crusades of Iron Men and Saints by Harold Lamb, written in the 1930s, was written by what was probably an early autist who learned to speak Arabic and was going back to source documents to do this. People like Rodney Stark. Rodney Stark is a very objective guy who lambasts shitty historians that don't do their own proper research, including himself. So years down the line, he realized he made an error, and then he owns up to it and says, oh, I fucked it up, and this is how and why. I do the same. You know, in my Systema book, I was basically sort of going for some kind of agnostic Christianity as a result of reading Desjardins, Pierre Teilhard Desjardins, who was a complete arch heretic. But I was so far from Christianity that reading an arch heretic brought me closer, you know, so it was a valid, you know, God acts in mysterious ways. So, you know, you have to do your own research. And look, now with AI and deep fakes, there's a little brilliant program that I always forget the name on, a little mini series on, I think it's on Prime, about this British soldier who gets done for having attacked this woman, but it's not actually him. It's you know, he just left her, and then but the video cameras on CCTV show him beating her up and all sorts of shit. And he's like, but that didn't fucking happen. What are you talking about? That's real now. And there's some, you know, as you go deeper into the series, I don't want to give you spoilers, but there's some stuff that they mention in there that I'm absolutely fucking sure has been there for years, and now they're going to start doing it. Pretty soon, you're not going to be able to trust anything that you see on TV, on video, on the internet, if you haven't physically put your hand on it yourself. And that's why I'm saying I'm probably going to just disappear from the so-called connected society. You know, I'm here now for a time. Enjoy it while you can. Buy the physical books and whatever. But eventually, I will probably disappear offline of anything digital, because you know what Project Bluebeam is. They're starting to get to the point where they can create holograms that appear realistic to you, and the so-called, if you believe Wernher von Braun, which I do, you know, the next step is asteroids, and then after that it's an alien invasion. It's all fake, it's all bullshit, but it's going to be very convincing. So I'm going back to well, in the 1800s or 1500s or 1200s, you didn't know what the fuck was happening on the other side of the world. You didn't even know if the other side of the world was the world or existed or whatever. You knew what happened around you. that you could physically touch, see, and interact with, and that's pretty much your safe zone now. So, but you're still able to get information. Get paper books. Don't forget the digital shit, because they're editing that now. You're buying a book on digital platforms, and that's going to be changed. You won't even know that it's been updated, and they've converted it and changed it and changed words in it, and they're already doing that. So I just go with physical books, and that's it. If I can't get the physical book, I don't bother with it, basically. That's where I'm at. And all the books are better. Like, I've made a list of, like, I think, was it fiction or non-fiction? I've got a list. I need to do this. I need to put it up on the blog, but when I get a minute, Underbear, need camo top cover, like a camo umbrella from IR detection for infantry. We're way past that, buddy. There's, Mark Carlotto designed software that could find fractal shape under camouflage 30 years ago. So, that level of detail now. I mean, you can see the Ukrainian guys. They're like camouflage, and there's like a little drone that's got picks them out, boom, nukes them, and it's like. And at first, you can't even see the guy. After it's got bombed, you see like a little human flying out from the camouflage. And it's like, oh, fuck. It's well beyond that sort of thing. That war is the number one thing I think about beyond my family. Do you think it will become a wider war soon? Yes, but probably not as people expect. I don't expect it'll become an uncontrolled nuclear global holocaust. I don't expect that. Because, again, if I was Putin, I would have at least a few hypersonic missiles aimed right up the ass of the people that are doing all this shit. And I would make sure they know that. And it would be like, if you pull that trigger, you're going down. You're definitely going down. And I think there's been quite a lot of indication that it's done that, like Russian subs off the coast of America and whatever, So, limited nuclear war, definite possibility. Conventional war, definite possibility, but to be honest, I'm not particularly worried about that. If it was going to come to, let's say, I don't know, Britain, Germany, Italy, France all decide to send troops to Russia, and Russia decides, okay, fuck you guys, we're going to take over Poland, Romania, and then we're going to take over France, Germany, and Italy. Even if it came to that, I think at worst it would become mini tac nuke sort of thing, and it would be conventional warfare, but like the same stuff that you're getting in Ukraine now, which wouldn't particularly worry me. It's a little bit of bad luck if whatever, if your own, let's say I'm Italian, and I'm in Italy, if your Italian government thinks, oh, you're a dissident, they might bomb your ass. Or the Russians might think, oh, that house is a strategic point, and they might bomb your ass to take it over, or whatever. But I think if you keep your head down and, just fucking try not to bother anybody, and when somebody does come to bother you, you fucking go at them until there's nothing left and they're dead or you're dead, I think your chances are pretty good to survive that sort of war. Certainly more likely for that to happen throughout Europe than North America. I think North America's got other problems which are more internal than external. But I think the generic zeitgeist is going to be a continual throttling of humanity by the powers that be, by digital fucking IDs and digital money and all that. It seems like Russia, China, most of Latin America are trying to break out of that. Certainly all of Africa at the moment. But is Putin the savior of the world that is gonna like get rid of digital currencies and make everybody free? I think Putin is doing what's best for Putin and for Russia, and that's good. And I think China's probably doing the same. But I certainly would not want to live under Chinese rules. The way those guys live over there is unacceptable to me. I could probably live under Russian rules quite comfortably. Probably more comfortably than American rules. I'd rather live under Russian rules than American rules. But Italy is theoretically living under American rules, but in reality, we're kind of like, I'll do it tomorrow, you know. So it's kind of like not too uncomfortable. Um, I don't know. I hope that, and don't be afraid, you know, Sam. Don't be worried about the war. That, again, you're a soldier in the spiritual army of Christ. It's not the physical war. Is, you know, maybe you die tomorrow because you don't look both ways when you cross the road. It's not, death is not something to fear, you know, as a Catholic. Merck says kind of. I'm assuming that's to like the whether I've answered your question. If I haven't, you know, ask some more or tell me to detail something more. DTDW says, for the book part, I mean, will you be having AI write your books and then slap your name on it? But you answered it. Can't wait for your typewritten book release. I'd actually started that. It's a little bit time consuming because I was going to write it on this, where's my finger? This typewriter here, which is from the like 1800s, and it's brilliant. It's better than the other ones because it's got a little tumbler, so you can't get the keys stuck. You can type as fast as you want and it'll work, but it's very old. It needs a little bit of TLC to fix it and whatever. And I was going to write a short story on that and then use the scanning function on my phone to like convert it to like text to then upload it as a PDF. So, you know, that's brutal, but I think it would be a really good exercise personally. And no, I am never going to use AI to write my fucking books for me. That's just, I don't know, that would be like cheating on your wife with a man. You know, it's just, nah, I'm not going to touch that shit. It's just wrong. Woolly Ram, hello sir. Everybody says hi to Woolly Ram. TVC says, read the fuck out of Orthodoxy by Chesterton. Oh, there you go. So yeah, Orthodoxy. I could see Orthodoxy appealing to Tony, probably more than it does to me. But like I said, just get a list of Chesterton books and, like, you know, pick one out that you think would be interesting, and it will be. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Yeah, that guy says, I started with Heretics. I think, yeah, I probably enjoyed Heretics more than Orthodox. Merg says, The Man Who Was Thursday and Napoleon of Notting Hill are pretty good novels of his. Thanks for the suggestion. Woolly Ram says, here is an example of all the texts being better. In all the Israeli historical texts from around 1950-1960, there is no reference to the Holocaust. Wow. What they do mention is the destruction of European Jewish communities. That is very interesting. See, I didn't know that. And you see that when you get like a glitch in the matrix of that nature, then you know you're onto something, you know. The Crusades of Iron Men and Saints and The Great Siege of 1565 by Earl Bradford, and, you know, The Crusades is by Harold Lamb. Absolute must read books. If you're in any way remotely interested in the history of Christianity, do yourself a favor. At a minimum, read those two books. Pedro says, Mr. Kurgan, any plans on keeping your dedicated platform when you withdraw from Connected Society? No. If I withdraw from society, I will not have any online stuff, any digital shit whatsoever. I literally will not have a phone of any kind. Not even one of the brick Nokias. I will not even have a fucking landline phone. It'll be like, you want to see me, you come walk to my house and you talk to me. It'll be like that. I'll be that way inclined. I would not have any kind of vehicle that has GPS or any kind of tracking. I would literally, I can't define it right now because I'm still developing some of the details, but it would be something that has never been seen before. It would not be like the Amish, and it would have alternative technology that I can't even really talk about because people don't even understand that it exists or that it can exist. So yeah. Where are we? Sorry, let me just catch up with where I was. Woolly Ram says, expect cyber warfare false flags. Yes, we've just had one. Oh, apparently there's a run on the banks or an attack on the banks in Europe and possibly America happening now in this next day or two. So you may want to get cash out. TVC says, a possible analogy for the desire is like trying to fly a rocket from one planet to another. Sorry, a possible analogy for the willing prayer thing. Most desire is like trying to fly a rocket from one planet to another, trying to capture, conquer them. But for the man in the proper prayer, it is as if he is in his own center of gravity, with the objects/aims orbiting around him, content for those objects to move and approach him as they may, provided that he knows that his center and the whole energy power that energy is based from is God. The gravity is God, and so long as the man knows that, he can be in the center of gravity and will the outcomes even as he prays. Yeah, a little bit convoluted, but I suppose if that worked for you, yeah, well, why not? Muliram says, and I only know that because I skipped school and went to the library instead. There you go. School. School is another giant fuck up. Pretty much everything you get told in school is a fucking lie, with the possible exception of, elementary level maths. It's indoctrination. There's no other way around it. It's absolute indoctrination. Like my son is 4 years old, and now he's asking. I never told him this. He hasn't seen it on any fucking YouTube video or whatever. And he asked his mom the other day, like, Mom, he's been asking me for a while about, are we on a planet? What is a planet? And so I showed him, I've got a globe there, and I've got another little one for him. And I showed him, look, we live here, and, there's a spinning. And he's like, didn't question it for like, a few weeks. And now, like yesterday, he said, Mom, we're on a planet, but is that planet moving? And she's like, yeah, but how? And she's like, fuck, son, I don't know, ask your dad, I barely know it's moving. And he's 4 years old, but he's like observing, and he a child left to his own devices, and I don't mean left to his own devices to like you ignore, if you just answer his questions as best you can, and your questions are objectively answered, like not like ideologically answered. So it's like, my daughter asked me about the cross and like, what is it and what's it for? And I just give him very basic explanation. I'm like, oh, it's a cross. I'm like, what is a cross for? I'm like, well, it's to remind me of like God. And he's like, well, what is God? And it's like, it's very hard to explain. It's like, when you feel good inside and there's somebody looking after you, that's like, kind of God is like that in the universe, and it's like, they don't really question it, they sort of like, okay then, and they sort of like play with it, and then a week later, a month later, a year later, they'll come and ask a follow-up question. And as long as you're as truthful and as honest and as objective as you possibly can, they will come out with amazing, like, intelligent deductions of they will show you things you didn't think about. They will literally like come up with things that you never considered. Like, for example, my little daughter, she's not even 3, she's like 2.5 years old. And she spoke very early, from before the age of 2, like a friend of ours got them a trampoline, which is like really awesome. They really love it. And she doesn't call it a trampoline. She calls it a jumpoline, which makes perfect sense. Like, why the fuck would you call it a trampoline? It is a jumpoline. You're jumping on it, and it's a jumpoline. I call it jumpoline now. It's like, I don't even bother calling it trampoline. It's like, it's a much better word, jumpoline. And, the kids have like an amazing logic. And the thing is, like, when you go to school and you force them to sit in a fucking chair for like 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day or whatever the fuck it is, to brainwash them with like, and Christopher Columbus crossed the ocean blue in 1492. Yeah, okay, it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's good to know the history. But imagine if instead of teaching him, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, you taught him like, hey, let's go to the lake. Okay, let's build a boat. Okay, let's see this boat. Can this boat get to that little island? And maybe we have a remote control, maybe we don't. Okay, we build a boat without the remote control, just a little line so we can pull it out when it sinks. Oh shit, the boat sank. Okay, we'll do it again tomorrow. And then, like, for a week, you're building little boats in the lake that sink, that don't work, that eventually you get one that works and gets to the little island or crosses the little lake. Like, yay! You know what that guy is? That guy's like Christopher Columbus. You know when Christopher Columbus was around? He sailed not just a little lake, he sailed an ocean. Nobody knew what was on the other side of it. They're never going to forget that shit, right? And that's meaningful then, because it means like, oh, who was Christopher Columbus? Oh, he was a Genoese. Oh, Genoa. Genoa is like in Italy. Yeah, that's right. Oh, guess what? Your great-grandfather was from Genoa. He was a Genoese. Oh, and who's Marco Polo? Well, he was a Venetian. Like you're Venetian. And he went all the way to China, there's like Chinese guys, yeah. He talked to them. Nobody knew, what they did. That's a way to teach. And imagine how much more interesting that is. And that's what parents should do. That's, the whole idea of school was like, oh, you put them there and we brainwash them to be all robots that don't question the authority of the day or what is going on, So it's like school is, like my daughter is going to school here, and the way I tell her is like, look, the only thing about school is you got to pass those exams. It's like a test for you how to see if you can navigate humanity. And humanity are essentially 98% of the time complete fucking morons. So you have to know what you need to know, what you need to do to pass those exams and to like survive the average peasant. But don't you think that what you're telling you is the truth necessarily? So come and check with me. If they tell you this and this happened, or this and this is real, come and ask me. Is that true? Did this happen? What does this mean? And she does. And she's pretty clear on a bunch of stuff. They're very, very sharp kids. If you tell them the truth, like my first wife, her daughter is like, I think 16 now, but when she was like 11 or something, for Halloween. Now imagine she's 11. The average person nowadays has got no understanding of what communism, capitalism, socialism, they don't even understand what these things really are, the history of it, what it means. What did she dress as for Halloween? Kim Jong-un, because the scariest thing that she could think of was a communist dictator. Okay? Now, she was 11, right? She was 11 when she did this. It was fucking brilliant. That's what I'm saying. And little kids, if you tell them the truth and you let them explore and you encourage them to explore whatever it is that they're interested in, they will become savants. They will become geniuses in their field because they haven't been blocked by the fucking bullshit that they get taught in school. So, TVC says, oh no, that was like, I read that already. Wade Wilson says, they're indoctrination camps. Yeah, recruitment camps and hunting preserves for predators. Schools are cancer. I hate hearing about the importance of education coming from state institutions. Yeah. Wally Ram says, if you teach your kids to read, do maths, the basics of Aristotelian logic, perhaps the Socratic method for your more autistic kids. Yeah, so long as they have access to books and time to ask questions, they will learn. Yes. Which is another reason I'm thinking of completely getting rid of the digital sort of world. It's like, if you now know how to learn to read and write, and hey, there's a book there, yeah, guess what? Oh, you want to learn about what? You want to learn about making puppets, right? We'll buy you a book on puppets. Or you want to learn about farming or like plants? Oh, here's a book on plants with pictures, and you can like figure out which plants are what and how to use them. That's how you learn. Wade Wilson says, she will learn how NPCs think and behave, and I mean the teachers more than the classmates. Yeah, exactly. Kids are getting pretty switched on nowadays. They're starting to become aware of the kind of brainwashing that they're being subjected to. So yeah, that's absolutely true. Guys, I've been talking for over 2 hours. I'm getting a little bit parched despite my wine and water. So I think I'm gonna call it a day for my Sunday sermon. No such thing. I hope it's been useful. What would be useful if one of you has got the time would be if you could send maybe a little list of like, of the timestamps for different topics that I touch upon. I never have the time to do that. It would be a really good thing to be able to do. I know there's a guy called Olive Oil Guy who puts my videos on podcasts as well. So that's pretty awesome that he does that. So, but if one of you doesn't mind doing a little timestamp thing and just emailing it to me, and then I can add it under the video, that would be awesome. Merck says, the more I think about it, weren't there more than one type of schooling prior to the modern era? Yes, of course. Modern Prussian-derived schooling fools you into thinking there's only one type. Yes, exactly. Of course there are. And if you're interested in that, on Kurgan TV, Tony did a brilliant series on education, on Catholic education, the Trivium, and it's a brilliant little series of very short, very instructive videos. So if you're a member of the Kurgan TV thing, it's very powerful, and it's got very good reviews from everybody who looked at it. Woolly Ram says good night, and I'm gonna say good night to all you guys. Thank you very much for being here and interacting and, you know, throwing stuff in the chat. That was very, I enjoy these ones. I enjoy when we're like talking to each other and hopefully helping each other. You know, I gain from it. I learn stuff from you guys, or makes me think and verbalize things better, I think. So thank you for that. Yes, Wade says, by the way, happy Father's Day. Great stream as always. Thank you very much. And of course, happy Father's Day to all of you, as I said at the beginning. And good night, and God bless every one of you.